We begin this morning with the midterm elections and the latest developments in races across the country with just 20 days to go.
With control of Congress hanging in the balance, President Biden is trying to make abortion rights the main focus of the campaign. He's telling voters that if they give Democrats control of the House and Senate, the first bill he'll send to Congress will be one that codifies Roe into law. At the same time, early voting is already underway in more than a dozen states, with more states to follow, and we're already seeing massive turnout at the polls. In Georgia, they've already surpassed the number of votes cast in early voting in the 2018 midterm election. This morning, we're focusing on key races in Arizona and Florida, and we're looking ahead to early voting in North Carolina. We begin with NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray, who joins us now with the latest on the midterms. Mark, good morning to you. So let's start with President Biden promising to codify Roe versus Wade if Democrats remain in control of Congress in the new year. A recent poll, though, shows the economy is on the minds of more Americans than abortion rights is. So is this the right strategy? And really, what's the president's message to voters as he tries to lay out his vision for after the midterms?
Yeah, Joe, abortion rights has become a galvanizing issue for Democrats, and we saw that after the Supreme Court overturned the Roe versus Wade ruling that had existed for more than 50 years. And we saw that in polling in Kansas and other special elections where that issue really did fire up Democrats. And one way to actually look at what President Biden was doing yesterday in his remarks in Washington, D.C., was just to kind of reignite that flame a little bit and make the point that if Democrats hold on to control of the U.S. House of Representatives and gain additional Senate seats, that he'll codify, that he will work and make it a priority to codify Roe versus Wade. Take a listen to his remarks, what he said yesterday.
Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader of the House, has said that if they take control of the House, our work is, quote, far from done. That's why in these midterm elections are so critical to elect more Democratic senators to the United States Senate and more Democrats to keep control of the House of Representatives. Here's the promise I make to you and the American people. The first bill that I will send to the Congress will be to codify Roe v. Wade. And when Congress passes it, I'll sign it in January.
Joe, it is important to note that while the president was talking about abortion rights yesterday, it's not the only thing that he and Democrats are talking about. Today, he's going to be addressing energy prices from the White House and then later talking about the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Okay, so that's the national big picture. I want to turn to Arizona, the race for governor there. The GOP candidate Kari Lake actually campaigned last night with former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who recently announced that she had left the Democratic Party, which maybe wasn't terribly surprising to most Democrats. But tell us about the state of this gubernatorial race and the significance of having a former Democrat on the campaign trail.
Yeah, Joe, this is one of the most consequential gubernatorial races in the country. Of course, this takes place in battleground Arizona. It is also one in which Arizona's abortion laws are on the book. And it is a state in which, because of its battleground nature, who is governor, who is secretary of state, who is attorney general really does matter. And Kari Lake is someone who ended up denying the 2020 presidential results. It's also notable that Tulsi Gabbard, who was campaigning with her, she was a Democrat who ran for president in the 2020 cycle. And it's not the first election denying Republican that she has campaigned with. She also campaigned with New Hampshire Senate candidate Don Bolduc as well.
And Mark, let's talk about the early voting so far in this election. I mean, in Georgia, more than 131,000 people cast their ballot on the first day of early voting there. That's nearly double what we saw in the 2018 midterms. What are these numbers telling us about the state of the election? Is this something we could expect in other races, say like North Carolina, which begins early voting tomorrow?
We've just seen a really sea change in how people cast their votes, particularly in states that have liberalized their voting, have allowed us a lot of weeks of early voting or very liberalized types of mail-in ballots. Joe, when I first started covering politics 20 years ago, almost everyone ended up voting on Election Day. And if you couldn't make it on Election Day, you'd had to actually mail in your ballot and go through a whole big process to be able to do that. Nowadays, people can actually vote early. And we're seeing a lot of Democrats, and usually more Democrats than Republicans, take advantage of this. Donald Trump ended up kind of instructing Republicans to remain Election Day voters. And we see this big difference where a lot of Democrats ended up casting early ballots. They cast mail-in ballots, and Republicans wait till Election Day. And as we're going to be watching the returns on election night, it's important to keep that in mind, because some states end up releasing their mail-in ballots and early ballots first, and other ones actually save that for the end. And so as all the results come in, we're going to see different batches just on how differently people vote. And that also includes in Georgia.
Very important to prep our audience for what's going to happen on election night. Mark, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.